Mm-hmm.
Am I on now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to welcome everybody to the third installment of our Facebook Live virtual tour. If you tuned in the last 2 weeks, you got to see our foaling barn as well as go on a stallion tour with Kevin. Today we're actually going to look at our nursery, and I'm going to talk about how we operate on the mare and foal broodmare side. I guess I first need to introduce myself. My name is Mary. I am one of the assistant broodmare managers here at Claiborne. There are 3 of us total, and we manage about 250 mares in total on this farm. Now that includes both our foaling mares, our barren mares, which are mares that are not pregnant, and our maiden mares, which are mares that are fresh off the track. They have not been bred yet. Those mares range anywhere from 3 to maybe 6 years old. It really depends on when their racing career, when their owners decide that they're ready to move on to the second part of their career. First, we will actually, if you guys tuned in last week at the foaling barn, you might recognize this mare. This is Stradivarius. She has now transitioned into the nursery barn. So you'll notice she's in a smaller style paddock. So our mares and foals will actually spend the first anywhere from 8 to maybe 10 days of life in one of these smaller paddocks. So we do that for several reasons. One of them is it allows the mare and the foal to bond appropriately, which is very important early in life. It also allows the foals to be limited in their exercise. They're still very fragile when they're young. Their joints are still fusing. This allows them to have a limited amount of exercise, but they do get that sunshine and that grass and that exercise that they do need. So once we decide that a foal is ready for the big field, we will then move them into one of our larger fields. I think you might be able to see a foal in the background running around and playing, showing off. So the age in which they do move to that larger field is very dependent on the individual. We don't lump any of our horses into one category. We do treat them all on an individual basis. So a foal that is correct and ready to go at, let's say, 8 days is going to graduate into the field. But one that might need a little bit longer in the paddock, that's fine. We'll leave them in the paddock as long as they need. So we'll actually walk over here to the gate of one of our large fields. Now our fields range anywhere from 20 to 40 acres, and the size of the field will determine how many mares and foals we actually put in the field. So a smaller field is going to have a smaller herd in it, and a larger field is capable of maintaining a larger herd. So our herd sizes per field can be anywhere from 5 sets of mares and foals to maybe 10. The ones with 10 mares and foals are obviously going to be the much larger fields. So right now, these foals are transitioning from the smaller paddocks to the larger fields. So we only have 3 mares and foals out here. They are being a little bit shy today, so they're a little bit harder to see. But actually, off in the distance, way off in the distance, you might recognize our star of 2019's Foal Patrol with honors. She has a very, very, very nice tappet filly with her. They are enjoying the grass. The grass here in Kentucky is really starting to come on. I would say we've had some sunny days, but you guys might call me a liar with the overcast we have right now, but the weather has actually been very pleasant here in Kentucky. An early start to our spring.
And any of our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and Mary will answer them to the best of her ability.
I love questions. So if we pan over to the left a little bit more, you might see these white cylinders out in the field. So these are actually our water tanks. Our water tank is going to be closest to us. That is an automatic waterer. Automatic waterers are both a blessing and a curse. They are checked every single day to make sure that they are working. They're also insulated so they don't freeze up in the winter. And then a little bit further back, that is actually our salt tank. So as opposed to using large blocks of salt like you might see at other farms, we actually use loose salt that when we pour it on the tank back there, when the mares lick it, it actually does form a large block on its own.
One of our viewers would like to know how long our mares and foals are left out during the day.
Ooh, good question. So right now, we have two different schedules here. Right now, they are on what we call our winter schedule. So they are actually turned out from 7 a.m. until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're out during the warmest part of the day. Now, once the weather is consistently warm, we will actually reverse that schedule. So they will be out throughout the whole night. They'll spend the majority of their time outside in the spring. But right now they are out during the day and up at night.
Here's another good question. Sophie would like to know if we mix our colts and fillies or if we keep them separated.
Yes, at this point in their life, we do have colts and fillies together. Even after we wean the mares, they will be colts and fillies. We divide the colts and fillies up when they move to the yearling division of the farm, and that will happen in October. So we have 3 different divisions here on the farm. We have the Claiborne division, we have the Marchmont division, and we have Cherry Valley, which is where we keep our yearlings. We are actually standing on the Marchmont side of the farm right now. We are at Marchmont 6. I probably should have said that at the beginning. It is one of 2 nursery barns here on the farm. So after a foal graduates from the foaling barn, which Lauren talked about last week, once they're cleared by the vet, it's usually about 24 hours. If it needs to stay at the foaling barn to be monitored for a little bit longer, that's fine. But generally about 24 hours, they will then move to the nursery barn. And as I mentioned earlier, they'll spend about a week, maybe 10 days in the small paddocks before they go to a big field. Once they're in the big field, we wait until we have a full herd, is what we call it, or a group that's going to move to a separate barn. So it's a little bit of like a graduation system. So you can consider the foaling barn like their nursery, even though this is a nursery barn. I like to think of this more as like kindergarten. So this is where they will learn a lot of little basic manners. They'll be taught to lead by our great guys that work in these barns. Russell does a great job with the foals. Chris does a great job with the foals. At our other nursery barn, we have Dusty, we have Mike. They do a fantastic job with these foals. They teach them how to lead. They give them a lot of basic manners early on. So when they do get bigger, it's much easier for us. So once we have the set number, that depends on which barn they're going to. Like I said, anywhere from 5 to 10, depending on their next location. They will then be trailered over to their next barn. Now, at that next barn, the foals will spend the remainder of their time before they are moved to the yearling side of the farm at that barn. If that's confusing, I'm sorry. They essentially live in 3 different locations before they move on to the yearling side of the farm. So how we wean our mares, there are many different methods to how to wean a foal from a mare. The way that we do it is the way that's worked best for us. What we will do is we will actually take the mare away from the foal. We will start out with 2 mares from a field so that when the mare goes to her weaning location, she has a buddy, she's not alone. And throughout the next week or 10 days, we will take an additional mare from that field until we're left with just 1 mare and all the foals. She is essentially the babysitter. Usually that mare is going to be a little bit more tolerant because she's suddenly found herself the mother of multiple foals. And then once that group settles down, we then will remove the last mare and we'll have a completely weaned group of weanlings.
Laurianne wants to know, what age does that happen? Does weaning
That's a good
happen?
question, and I actually didn't mention that at the beginning. So, as I mentioned, with the foals and the paddocks, we like to individualize everything. So we don't have a set date or set age that we will wean our foals. We will wean according to the individual. So if we have a foal that's a little bit on the smaller side, we will leave it on the mare for a little bit longer. A foal that is large and maybe growing a little bit too quickly, we'll wean that foal a little bit earlier because he's getting a little bit too much nutrition. And one of the ways that we can cut back his nutrition is by eliminating the mare's milk. So then he will just rely on his grain ration and his grass and his hay. So when a foal is first born, they rely solely on their mother's milk for their nutrition. And as they get older, they rely less on that milk and a little bit more on the grass and the hay and the grain ration. We don't do what's called creep feeding here. We do allow the mare and the foal to share a tub, so they will naturally ration themselves.
Someone wants to know if it's harder for the mare or the foal when weaning happens.
Usually the mare is ready to be weaned. And actually, the foal might be distressed for maybe a few hours, but with the other mares out in the field with it, that's only probably going to last maybe half a day, and then they're settled.
All right, want to head down that way? And
So
check
we'll
out
walk
some
down the
of our
lane a little bit. So this barn is set up with several paddocks surrounding it. That allows this to be an optimal nursery barn. So in this paddock over here, we have a good example of one of our homebred mares here at the farm. Out in this paddock is a mare named Link. Link is a warfront mare who's actually half to one of our racehorses, Mucho. So her bloodlines are Claiborne, Adele Delschneider through and through. She has a very nice blame filly next to her. This filly's about 10 days old. Any questions? She might. We can try to see if she would take a peppermint, so we'll get a little bit of a closer look.
One of our viewers would like to know, why would it be bad for the foal to grow too fast?
Oh, good, very, very good question. So when a foal is growing too fast, they might develop a condition called epiphysitis, and that's going to be an inflammation of their growth plates. And that is a condition that, if not treated, if left unchecked, can go on to result in more detrimental results to their joints. So as Lauren mentioned last week, we put halters on our foals from day one. So we essentially don't have to go through that halter breaking process. It's a very natural process because they don't really know what it's like to not have a halter on. We do check the halters daily to make sure that they still fit, as these foals are growing really fast. Here, girl. Come in here. Here, girl. Now these foals are still pretty shy at this age. So he's probably not going to let me just go up there. He'll be very reserved. He'll stay by his mother. Oh, he doesn't want it. Is he being shy? So right now our foals are not named. They are referred to as their mother's name and then the year that they're born. So this foal is length 20. When a horse, a racehorse, gets its name is really dependent on the owner. Some owners, I think Lauren touched on this last week, I think some owners like to name their horses right away. Some wait until they develop more of a personality and go into training so they can get a feel for what's going to be a good name for them. And all of our mares here have two different forms of identification. So they all have their halters, which about 90% of the time will have their name on the halter. They also wear this neck strap, which is, I guess you call these rivets. These are put on with rivets. So these are not, you cannot take these off. The only way you can take them off is to cut them off, so you cannot switch them. It also has her name on it. So these are, the Kentucky breeding sheds require this as a form of identification. So all of our mares have these. So the Jockey Club is doing away with the traditional tattooing process that they used to do for racehorses. So now we will actually microchip our foals. So once these foals get a little bit older, we'll start to microchip them. How you doing? Being a little shy. So this is a very correct foal. This is what I would call a pretty typical blame. He's correct, he's leggy, he's got a good hip to him. This is what we like to see in our foals at this age. We like to see balance. You know, they're not going to be as balanced as an adult horse because their proportions are still a little bit off. Their legs are much longer than their body. They of course will grow into those long legs of theirs, but this is a very balanced filly right here. She's showing off a little bit. She's posing for you guys. Okay, I think we'll go check out, we've got another one I want to show you guys up close. Go enjoy your grass. She might just follow us. He's gonna run around and show off a little bit.
Some of our viewers would like to know where we put their microchips.
Good question. There's a large muscle that runs along the top of their neck. That is a good meaty muscle, and that's where we put it in. It's exactly like microchipping your dog. It's about the size of a grain of rice. The only downside to the microchipping is you have to have a chip reader, which not everybody has a chip reader in their pocket, so that's fine. So when they are scanned, it's scanned like a barcode almost, and it'll bring up the horse's identification number. And actually, prior to getting that identification number, we send a hair sample into a lab to do some DNA testing to ensure that the horse is who it is supposed to be. Okay, we'll walk down here. We're actually going to walk down this lane a little bit.
Sarah wants to know if all of the foals on the farm are by Claiborne stallions or some by other stallions.
So we're probably about half and half with our foals. About half of our foals, no, it's probably a little bit more than that. A little more than half are Claiborne Claiborne stallions, and the rest are by outside stallions. So we're a little bit of everything. About a third of our mares are owned by the farm, and the rest are owned by various clients. We have some clients that have been with Claiborne Farm for generations. We have some that are relatively new to Claiborne Farm.
One of our viewers would like to know if we ever worry about predators, especially at night.
That's a good question. So I think I've said everything's a good question. They are all great questions. We actually have a group of night watchmen that do regularly patrol the farm. We find that our predator population is fairly low. We are out, this is a farm, so we do have coyotes. In general, they aren't a problem. So this mare out here is owned by an owner that has been with Claiborne Farm for several generations, the very well-known Phipps family. This mare that we're gonna see, her name is Abaco. So Abaco was a grade 2 winner, grade 1 placed, was trained by Shug McGahee. She is by Giant's Causeway. She has a very beautiful union rag. He's taking a little nap that we're gonna disrupt him.
Chloe wants to know, Mary, what your favorite mare is, and
Ooh.
possibly foal so far.
Well, my favorite mare is going to be Elate. Elate is a maiden mare this year, so she'll have her first one next year. Elate is one of our farm-owned race mares. Elate has been my favorite since several years. So I'm excited to see her foal next year. So this foal is a little bit bigger than the other one. Giant's Causeways Union Rags tend to be a little bit bigger than the Blames. Let's take a look.
And Mary, what's your favorite part of your job here at Claiborne?
I love seeing the babies go on to be racehorses, and then I love seeing the race fillies come back and be broodmares. I love seeing the continuing of the generations. I don't know if I mentioned in the beginning, I've been here since 2012, so I've been here long enough that my babies from the first years are now coming back and having their own babies, and it's really exciting to see everything come full circle, and it's really exciting to see one of your babies go on and do something really cool on the track. And you know what this is, don't you? I gotta get the wrapper off.
Jean,
I guess Shug feeds mints because
Jean
she
wants
knows
to
what
know
this is.
how long you've been with Claiborne.
I've been with Claiborne since 2012. I've been around horses my whole life though, but with Claiborne since 2012. I'm originally from Tennessee, so this is, please don't hold that against me if you're a Kentuckian. It's fairly close to home, but far enough that mom and dad can't visit every weekend. So this is, again, another very correct, very beautiful foal. Yeah, I've got a little bit of a loose halter, that's okay. So you can see that gumming that they're doing with their mouth. That's very normal for a baby this age to be doing. It's a sign of passiveness a little bit. It's letting me know that it's nervous that I'm around, and that's fine. They're all a little bit nervous around humans. That's something that they naturally get over the more that they're handled. These foals are handled every single day. And at this age, they tend to always be glued to their mother. Their mom is their safe zone. And as they get older, they will venture away, and they'll start, once they're in a group, they'll start playing with the other foals more, developing their personalities. Up close and personal.
There's the phone.
Oh, where are you going?
Do all mares like peppermints, Mary?
No, they actually don't. That might be a little bit of a common misconception. It seems like more of them don't like mints than do like mints. I don't know if it's just because maybe on the track they're not necessarily fed peppermints every day. I don't know if it's that they're maybe a little bit pickier, but more often than not, they actually won't take the peppermint.
So Mary, tell us a little bit about how your schedule works here on the farm.
Yeah,
What's a typical
good.
day like for you?
That's good. So we are in our busiest time of year right now. This is the foaling and the breeding season. So our foaling season lasts from January until June. We like to not have any June foals. We like to have the last of our mares foal out in May. That's just the farm's personal preference. And our breeding season is a month behind that because a mare's gestation is 11 months. So we are really busy from February until July. So we are in our busy time, so this is my busy schedule. I start work at about 5 a.m. I come in, and the first thing I do is I start teasing mares. So that is, I have a teaser stallion. So we have teaser stallions strategically placed around the farm according to what group they're going to be working with. And we will go barn to barn with our teaser and see if any mares are demonstrating any signs of heat. A mare that is then going to be checked by our vet that day, so then we can get her bred. We want to breed our mares as close to ovulation as possible, so we will see if they're displaying signs of heat, and then our vet will palpate the mare to determine the size of her follicle, which that is the thing on her ovary that holds the egg, basically is what it is. And once that is large enough and close to ovulating, we will try to breed her. So I come in at 5, I tease my mares, figure out our schedule for the day, and really from that point on, we're checking mares and doing vet work. We probably check around 35 to 45 mares a day, so that is the good chunk of our morning. Throw in some random cases, maybe something that popped up last night, maybe something that needs to be reevaluated. We have to be pretty flexible with our schedule. I will then maybe go to lunch, maybe not go to lunch, depends on the day. Then come back, and while our mares and foals are out in the field, we'll actually drive through all these fields and check on everything. That's something that we do every single day. They may be turned out in a field and they may be enjoying themselves, but that doesn't mean they aren't closely monitored every single day. So we'll drive through the fields, check everything, make sure everything's happy, grazing, and then about 3 o'clock we will start bringing up mares. And once again, make sure everything's fine, maybe finish up some little odds and ends vet work. And then usually about 4 o'clock I get to go home, rest up, and get started again for the next day. When we are not breeding, I am not here as early, but still pretty much just as early.
Never a dull moment.
I'm here every other weekend I'm off, so I'm mostly here 7 days a week. Any more questions?
Someone asked earlier if foals wear shoes.
No, foals do not wear shoes. We will put shoes on our yearlings that are going up to the sales. That helps with when they're at the sales, they are walking on a harder surface. It helps them stay a little bit more comfortable, but the foals don't wear shoes, and the majority of our mares do not wear shoes. We do have a couple mares that do need to have shoes, and that's fine. We cater to what they need, but most of our mares are barefoot. We love our farrier. Actually, in Kentucky, we call them blacksmiths. We love our blacksmith, but we do like to keep our mares barefoot. So we have another little nugget over here sleeping. Oh, he's smiling for y'all. I don't know if you caught that. Any other questions?
So this is obviously a maiden mare behind us. You talk a little bit about their first foal and
Yeah.
if their instincts are natural.
Okay,
or...
yeah. So 99.9% of the time, our mares are going to be very naturally good mothers. So this is her first foal. She was very naturally a good mother. Typically their first foal, the mares might be a little bit more protective. Their first foal, we kind of get an idea for how their personality is going to be with a foal by their side. Mares can be very different with a foal by their side versus when they're barren. Horses are very much individuals like people, and they have different personalities. 99.9% of the time, they're going to naturally be very good mothers. Sometimes they are not good mothers, and we will work with the mare to that's usually something that can get fixed, resolved within a couple days of just kind of, maybe working with the mare a little bit more, paying special attention to the foal. But generally their first foal, they're a little bit more protective. It's a little bit harder when we go to breed back the mare because it is a little bit harder to get a gauge on her personality and how she's going to react. So now I'll talk about breeding these mares back a little bit. So after a mare foals, she goes through a first heat cycle about 8 days after she foals. We call that the foal heat. We don't breed our mares on full heat. We might starting May 1st, but most of the times we don't. So after she goes through this initial heat cycle, 28 days after she foals, she'll go through another one, and that is when we will start trying to breed her again. Now, for any women or mothers that are watching, you might think, oh my gosh, 28 days after I have a baby, the last thing I want to do is be pregnant again. Horses are actually naturally very fertile animals. They want to get pregnant again. So 28 days we will start trying to breed them. Most of the time they do get pregnant that first cycle. Sometimes it takes a couple cycles afterwards. Now when we breed the mare, we will actually leave the foal behind in the barn. We do set up the stall so that it's completely safe for the foal. We will put the mare on a trailer, take her to be bred, and then bring her back to her foal immediately afterwards. Look at this little guy showing off. Look at him.
And one of our viewers, Stephanie, inquired about the Marchmont Cemetery. We are going to feature that. That's
Yes.
going to be 2 weeks from today.
Yes. So sorry, if you're watching for the Marchmont Cemetery, you just have to listen to me. So a lot of what we do as Broodmare managers this time of year, in addition to trying to get our mares pregnant for next year, in terms of the foals, it's a lot of patience is what our job requires right now. It's monitoring these foals daily, looking for any slight changes, watching how they're growing, monitoring their behavior, getting a gauge for their personality. But that takes a lot of patience. You have to look at these foals every single day to make sure there's no maybe changes in their ankles or their knees that might indicate that they need to be weaned a little bit earlier. So it does require daily monitoring.
Can you talk a little bit about, a lot of these foals will be led in and out, and we use 2 people to do that. So can you talk about kind of how we teach them to lead? And
Yeah, so that is, as I just mentioned, a lot of patience with these foals. Teaching them to lead is something that does require a lot of patience. There are 2 different ways that we do it on the farm. some guys like to just lead the foal and simply place a hand on the foal's back and teach them to move forward off that pressure. And some guys like to use what you call a butt rope. So they will be holding the foal and they'll actually wrap a rope around their hind end so it rests kind of just above their hocks, like in the crevice of their butt, to give them a little bit of pressure and a little bit of leverage to encourage them to move forward. Now, using a butt rope on a foal is usually something that you only have to do maybe for less than a week before they really get the idea of moving forward. So we teach the foals to lead from day one, so that eliminates the hassle of trying to halter break a much larger foal. I have previously worked on a quarter horse facility that chose to halter break foals at 4 months old. And let me tell you, that is a workout, teaching a 400, 500 pound foal to walk. It's much easier when they're a little bit smaller. So when these foals are born, they're anywhere from 100 to 150 pounds. We like for them to be kind of in that middle range, 120, 130. That's generally the size that we like our foals to be when they're first born. And they will quickly grow after that. Seems like you blink an eye and they're already on the racetrack. So if you notice that foal trying to press his little hind end against his mom, that's him being a little rambunctious and trying to play. That is a colt out there. That's kind of, colts are definitely stereotypically a little bit rougher. They like to play a little bit harder. They like to mess with their moms a little bit. The fillies do too, but you tend to see it more with the colts.
One of our viewers earlier had asked, do our foals take after the personalities of their mothers?
I see a little bit of both. It's probably about 50-50. I have heard people say that a stallion will not necessarily pass on its personality, but from my firsthand experience, I will say that that is definitely not the case. You can have foals that are by certain stallions that before you even interact with them, you can say, oh, I bet this one's got a little bit of spunk to it, and sure enough it does, or oh, I bet this one's just real laid back, and that's the case. So it's a little bit of both. And the same as with their physical looks. You can definitely get a foal that favors its mother more than its father, and that's really just a crapshoot with what you're gonna get. You do have some mares that tend to throw foals that always resemble them physically, and you have some that might have a foal 1 year and then have a full sibling the next year, and they can physically be completely different. So our mares, just a little bit about the breeding of our mares. We will start breeding our mares. The youngest we will breed is 3. The first year we will start breeding as 3. So she will then have her first foal at the age of 4. And we will breed our mares until they are in their late, well, there are two factors that may determine when we stop breeding a mare. One would be her age. We don't like to breed a mare that's past 20 years old. As they start to get older, there can be some complications, so we like to retire our mares happy and healthy, which you will get to see our retirement mares different week. Next week, or declining fertility. If a mare isn't going to get pregnant later in life, that's her way of naturally telling us that she's ready to be retired, and we will then retire her. So that gives you anywhere from probably 16 foals at the most out of a mare if you're lucky. It is not uncommon for a mare to skip a year, not be pregnant for a year. Maybe she has a late foal and we decide we're gonna skip her this year and get her started early the next year, that's fine. Or maybe a mare foals late and we have one chance to get her pregnant and it doesn't happen, that's fine. She'll be barren the next year and we'll get started early.
Good question from one of our viewers. Do we ever have twins?
Okay, we do everything we can to eliminate having twins. Twins are the #1 cause of abortions in horses. Twins may be cute, but in real life, twins are not very cute. A mare's uterus is only equipped to hold one baby inside. There's actually not enough room and not enough space, not enough nutrition for two. So typically if you have twins, they're going to be small. They're going to be probably too small to thrive. So we really try to eliminate that. So after we breed a mare, when we do our first pregnancy check at 15 days after she ovulates, we will make sure there's only one embryo in there. If there are two, we will go in and it's called manually reduce one of the twins so that there is only one embryo in there. We'll then check a couple days later to make sure everything looks good and then go on from there. So the pregnancy checks that we do with a mare, we will check her initially at 15 days to confirm a pregnancy. We'll then check 25 days, 35 days, 45 days, and 60 days. At 60 days, that will be our last check until the fall check to make sure she's still pregnant in the fall.
Nancy wants to know what happens to the mares once they're retired.
Once they are retired, we have a large field on one part of the farm where they get to live out their lives with the other retired mares. They get to enjoy the sunshine, they get to eat grass. In the winter, they get all the delicious hay that they want.
And we'll get to see that part of the farm next week with Del Hancock.
We really take pride in our broodmares. Our broodmares are they're the blood and the sweat and the tears of Claiborne Farm. And when our mares are done breeding, we want to treat them with every ounce of respect that they are due. So we do retire them in the back where they are just allowed to be horses for the rest of their life.
Emily was wondering who decides what mare is bred to what stallion.
That is the owner's decision. So the owner will look at a mare's pedigree and maybe her past production records and decide what stallion she wants to go with. We have some clients that like to go with first-year stallions so they can really get in on the market for a first-year stallion right away. We have some that really like to stick to their tried and true stallions, so they might have a mare that they breed to the same stallion repeatedly. They're happy with their results and their offspring, so they continue to do that. That's completely the owner's decision. Yeah, that was a good question. After the foals then go to the yearling side of the farm, they may either go on to race or they will go on to the sales. We'll sell about a third of our crop, so this is as yearlings. The rest will then go on to race. That's determined by the owner as well. Some clients like to only race, some like to only sell, and some like to do a little bit of both.
Very good. I guess we'll head back up this way. Any closing remarks, Mary? Or thank you very much for taking time out of your day.
I guess just before we finish up, I would like to say thank you guys for tuning in. This is a side of the industry that doesn't get to be seen on a regular basis. This is obviously what I'm passionate about because this is what I do. I think that this is really where it all begins. I think that the guys that raise these foals are really the unsung heroes of the industry. They're the ones that really set a horse up for success later on in life. You can't have a racehorse without starting here, so I'm really happy to open this up to everybody to let people see where it all begins.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mary.
thanks, guys.
Bye.